In the vast expanse of the open ocean, an immense oil drilling platform stood isolated upon the dark water. On one urgent occasion, a government-backed operation rushed to drill a new well, neglecting all standard safety measures and bypassing a crucial initial pressure test. This single oversight would lead to a catastrophic explosion on the platform, a disaster so sudden and overwhelming that the crew found themselves completely helpless against its force.
We've had a mass casualty explosion. We need assistance immediately.
The story focuses on a man named Mike Williams, who shares a loving home with his wife Felicia and their young daughter. As the film opens, Mike is spending a quiet morning with his family, explaining that his job requires him to work on a remote offshore gas rig. He tells them he must leave that very day for a 21-day shift. After a tender goodbye, Mike departs, first heading to a government coordination center to formally check in for his assignment. At this center, he meets two colleagues, Jimmy, who is Mike's supervisor, and a woman named Andrea, both of whom will be joining him on the same trip. Once the entire crew has registered, they all board a transport plane that carries them far out to sea, directly to the towering platform. Shortly after their arrival, Mike and Jimmy notice something unusual. A large group of off-shifting workers is preparing to leave on the very plane that just brought them, which strikes Jimmy as irregular. He immediately questions one of the departing men about whether the essential cement strength test was performed on the new drill site. This test is a fundamental safety procedure designed to confirm the integrity of the well and ensure it is safe to drill. The worker admits that no test was done, as the team had been too busy with other preparations. Deeply troubled by this news, Jimmy seeks out a crewman named Banks, who is still on the platform, demanding to know why the critical check was skipped. Banks simply states there wasn't enough time, an answer Jimmy finds reckless and unacceptable. Mike, equally concerned, approaches another worker called Caleb to ask about the missing test. Caleb confesses he knows nothing about it, explaining he was directly ordered not to perform the procedure. Following this lead, Mike finds Jason, the technician who was originally responsible for conducting the safety examination. Jason reveals that the platform's visiting government manager, a man named Don, personally instructed him to skip the test to save both time and money. Mike, though frustrated, keeps his composure and walks away from the conversation. One moment. If you like this kind of content, hit the like button. Thanks. After getting settled in his quarters, Mike calls his wife Felicia to let her know he has arrived safely and has begun his work, promising to call her again later.
Save you a lot of pain and money in the long run, I'll tell you. What's the matter? Well, you owe him a lot of money? Come on, Mike, stand on my hip. Shit, Jason. Yeah, baby.
He then finds Jimmy, and together they go to confront manager Don in his office. Jimmy gets straight to the point, telling Don firmly that he will not authorize any drilling to begin until the cement test is completed and the pressure readings are confirmed to be perfectly stable. Don is visibly irritated by this demand and pushes back, but Mike's strong support of Jimmy's position finally forces the manager to reluctantly agree.
Have a cookie, Bob.
No, you got problems there too, but I don't do shitters. That's engineering.
Who are you?
Mike Williams, Chief ET. Well, how can I help? I'm gonna stick my hand in that hole with that monster and hope for the best. Hope ain't a tactic, Don.
Thank you for your time.
Have a wonderful day, sir.
And you?
Not long after this meeting, the vital test commences. It involves using a long tube to extract drilling mud from the ocean floor beneath the platform, allowing the crew to finally gauge whether the underground pressure is secure or not. As the crucial safety test began, a small team of workers, including Caleb, gathered around the large tube to monitor its operation. Meanwhile, inside the platform's control room, Jimmy, Don, and Jason watch the process unfold through a bank of screens displaying various pressure indicators. The initial test proceeded but soon revealed a troubling result, an excessive and dangerous pressure reading within the tube. Jimmy immediately decided they could proceed no further and insisted they halt everything to solve this critical problem, proposing they run a second test only after the issue was fully resolved. Manager Don, however, strongly rejected this cautious plan, arguing that while the pressure was indeed high, the level was still within an acceptable range for them to continue. After a tense discussion, Jimmy reluctantly agreed to Don's demand against his better judgment. Following this decision, Jimmy and Mike were briefly taken to a lower deck where the crew held a small celebration honoring Jimmy for his more than 40 years of service working at sea. During this event, Jason privately expressed his deep worries to Don, warning that completing the test with such unstable readings risked a catastrophic pressure buildup. Don dismissed these fears and insisted Jason proceed. Complying with the order, Jason activated the systems to continue the test. Almost instantly, the pressure within the tube that was pulling mud from the ocean floor began to climb at an alarming and uncontrollable rate. Don stepped outside near the machinery to observe, accompanied by his dog, and for a few moments, everything seemed calm. Then, the disaster started. Caleb was the first to notice mud violently leaking from the tube, and before he could react, the pipe ruptured completely, unleashing a torrent of drilling mud across the platform. Jason rushed to close the main valves in a desperate attempt to contain the damage, but it was already far too late. Mere minutes after he sealed the system, the immense underground pressure caused the entire network of pipes to explode, setting off a chain reaction of blasts that tore through the rig. The force was so powerful it shattered the reinforced glass of the control room where Jason and his team were stationed. The destruction spread rapidly, engulfing even the large outflow pipes meant to divert mud safely away, and total chaos descended upon the platform. Elsewhere, Andrea was with a colleague named Baxter in a separate room when the first explosions shook the structure. Sensing the danger from her instrument readings, which showed a massive gas leak, she rushed out to assess the situation and immediately sent a frantic distress call. At the same time, Mike was having a video call with his wife Felicia when the lights in his room suddenly exploded and the connection was severed. He ran outside into a nightmare of fire, deafening noise, and collapsing equipment. Jimmy, who had been showering in his quarters, was violently thrown by a blast that sent glass shards deep into his body, leaving him severely wounded and disoriented. As the towering platform became a column of fire against the night sky, a nearby support ship saw the explosion and urgently contacted the Coast Guard to dispatch rescue teams. Mike fought his way through the burning chaos, helping an injured worker until he found Jimmy stumbling and almost blinded by his wounds. Mike supported Jimmy, and together they struggled toward the command room, hoping they might still find a way to control the inferno. Along the way, they witnessed many other workers who were injured or killed, especially those who had been working directly in the heart of the drilling area. Mike and Jimmy finally reached the command room where they found Andrea and a silent, shaken Don. Jimmy fixed Don with a look of pure fury and, with great effort, told him to leave immediately and get to a rescue boat. Without a word, Don departed. Left alone, Jimmy and Mike formulated a last-ditch plan to stop the fire by manually closing the main gas valves on the rig floor. Jimmy would stay in the command room to guide the attempt remotely, while Mike would have to venture back into the blazing heart of the disaster to physically turn the valves himself. As the fire raged, Mike and Caleb made their way through the smoke and heat to attempt closing the valves by hand, managing to reduce the flame somewhat, but failing to control the enormous blaze completely. By this time, rescue boats had finally arrived and were pulling the surviving crew members from the burning platform, evacuating them one by one until nearly everyone had been taken to safety. Soon, only Mike and Andrea remained on the disintegrating rig, facing the terrifying reality that their only chance for survival was a desperate jump into the ocean far below. Andrea, however, was frozen by panic and fear, refusing to jump and telling Mike to save himself and return to his family. Mike steadfastly refused to abandon her, and realizing there was no time left for persuasion, he physically carried her to the edge and pushed her into the water before leaping in after her. He swam hard through the choppy, debris-filled water until he reached her, keeping them both afloat until they were pulled onto a waiting lifeboat, and from there to the larger rescue ship where all the survivors had gathered. On the crowded deck of the ship, Jimmy began calling out the names of every crew member, checking who had lived through the catastrophe. Among those who answered were Caleb, Andrea, and Mike, alongside many others, but there were also many names that were met with only a painful silence. This grim count filled Jimmy with a furious grief, and he fixed a long, meaningful stare on Don, who stood apart from the group, silently holding him responsible for the entire tragedy. Unable to bear the weight of that accusatory look, Don turned and walked away from everyone. Later, the survivors were brought back to the government center on shore, where anxious families waited for news of their loved ones. The joyful reunions were mixed with terrible sorrow as the full scale of the loss became clear, leading to an emotional outburst where one grieving family member confronted Mike, demanding to know where his son was before security personnel intervened. Overwhelmed by the trauma of all he had witnessed and the friends he had lost, Mike retreated to a private room and broke down in tears. His wife and daughter soon found him, and they comforted him in his distress before taking him away from that place for good. In the aftermath, Mike made a firm and final decision that he would never again work on the ocean or return to that dangerous profession. The story concludes by revealing that these harrowing events are based on a true incident, and that the characters and situations portrayed are real. Following the disaster, Mike, Jimmy, Andrea, and the other survivors gave testimony in a court trial, where it was established for the world that the rush to drill by Don and the overseeing government officials was the direct cause of the catastrophic explosion and the tragic loss of life that followed.